Welcome to another special back-to-school edition of It Takes a Viking, the official podcast of the Salem State University Alumni Association and Foundation. My name is Mike Mitchell, Director of Engagement in the Office of Advancement here at Salem State. Excited to welcome to today's show the Dean of the Frederick E. Library, Elizabeth McKeigue. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Excited to share all about what's happening in your world here in the library and all the good things that are happening over here. But the first question I always enjoy asking folks is, what was it about this position that made you want to come to Salem State, and why Salem State?
Oh, yeah. First question they asked me at my interview too. So that's a good question. Well, I can tell you a little bit about the long path that I would say brought me back to Salem. I grew up in Danvers. I went to public schools in Danvers, okay. And I went to college in Washington, D.C., and I eventually ended up working in the library there as a student assistant. And I learned more about what a professional librarian was, about the field of library science. And it was there that I had a great mentor who encouraged me to go to graduate school. And I got a scholarship that paid for all of it to go work full time in the library and then take classes at night. So I was really, really well prepared for my first job, which happened to be at Harvard, which was really, again, I think because I had such great mentors and I had a great opportunity. And after that, after I worked for Harvard for several years, I also got a promotion to a library in California, a university there, where I was the associate director. And so a few years ago, I was looking for a director role. And I was sitting in my office in California, and someone I know who lives here in Salem, who teaches here at Salem State, called me up and said, our library director position is open. And I was really excited at the concept of coming back to this area, coming back to Salem State, to a school that I knew well from when I was growing up. I used to the old library that was torn down a few years ago. When I was in high school, some friends and we used to come over and use it just because it was, a college library. Mm-hmm. So I do feel in so many ways it was coming back. And another thing that really stood out for me was being a product of public schools, particularly in Danvers, where so many of my high school teachers, who were also amazing mentors to me, so many of them had gotten their undergrad and graduate degrees at Salem State. So I had this huge respect for what Salem State does in terms of preparing particularly teachers, because it made a difference in my life, and so to be able to, sounds cliche, but to come back and to give back like that is important to me.
And you've touched on something that I kind of get a kick out of asking the deans that I've met so far and will continue to meet, but obviously it's back to school. You've mentioned some folks that have played an important role in your development as a professional, but as you think back to either undergraduate or graduate experiences, was there a class that stood out to you as one of your favorites that you kind of remember, and what made it stick with you?
Yeah, there's a couple. I feel like my first year, freshman year, I had a class that was a first year, freshman year seminar that I just didn't even understand the concept of that to begin with. And it was on the history of philosophy, which is just a huge encompassing topic. Mm-hmm. But what was great is that I'd never studied philosophy before. I never had a chance to read some of the Western thinkers, but also a lot of Asian and other thought, and it was something that really opened up like kind of my world to think about these worldviews and these belief systems and these ways of thinking and these ways of thinking about who we are as humans, and how that was universal across these different experiences. That and that was just, to me, that was a moment where I said, oh, now I'm in college. Okay, this is what college is. And it was a really hard class, and the professor was actually kind of mean, but brilliant, right? And so like I have this thing about, if they're a little mean, but they're interesting, and they know what they're doing, and I say that like with all due respect, and in the end, it was it was a great class, and they were tough, they were fair, and I think that's it's almost like the class that you hate taking, you later on find, oh, that was the best class that I had. So that one stands out in my mind.
Fair enough. The
Yeah,
benefit of hindsight, you go,
yes,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
it helped lay the foundation for what's brought you here
It
today.
did.
So
Yeah, it did.
you mentioned earlier the old library.
Mm-hmm.
We are certainly not in the old library. You are the director of the Frederick E. Library and Learning Commons, named for the extraordinary activism of longtime Massachusetts Senator Fred Berry, a tremendous champion for public higher education. But this is not just a building full of books. There are a lot of things that happen in this building. What does some day-to-day life in the library look like these days? What are you seeing as some of the needs of our students, our faculty, our administrators, while also being mindful that you are the steward of this
Sure.
large and beautiful building now? So what does a day in the library look like these days?
Yeah, good question. I mean, obviously we are still a library. We still have physical books on the shelves. We have many thousands more electronic resources, things, ebooks and other materials that are all virtual that you just get through. So I often think of us as having sort of our physical presence and our virtual presence, right? So we're both. We have to maintain both. And we have to think about what are the things that we physically want to have here, what are the things that we have just electronically, and where do we try to provide both? Because there are definitely students who one often thinks that students just want to see everything online. It's been our experience, and there are actually studies that show that students, particularly students at the sort of traditional college age, 18 to 22 or 24, actually really appreciate reading things in print. And so we're mindful of the fact that while we're delivering much of our content is online and they want to look at it online, when they really want to read deeply and really they want the print. So we're trying to, and we can't buy everything. We can't get everything for everyone, but we try to also have great systems where we can get, with our partnerships with other libraries, get the information that people need in the way that they want it. So we call that interlibrary loan, but it's something that we do in terms of trying to get, and this works for faculty too. There's lots of things that we don't own in the library. So we see ourselves as a place where we have stuff, but our job really is to help get the material and the information to people. So it's about access more so than it's about storage, right? Like when you think sort of the kind of classic library as a place where we keep all the stuff. So for us, access is really what it's all about. The other thing about this building and about the concept of the Learning Commons is that, this is a library. It has quiet spaces where people can study, where we have some signs about making sure they have a silent area. We have other spaces in the building where we encourage talking, where we encourage students to work together collaboratively in sort of more group type activity. We have some special rooms actually that they can reserve and use for short periods of time to work together in groups if they need a more quiet space. But what's also special about this building is that we have other offices in the university that support student success that are nearby. So it's kind of a one-stop for students when they are trying to get help academically. So we have our Center for Academic Excellence, which is also we share the building with, which is great because students come in and they need to get some advice or tutoring on, what courses to take. They can stop by there. Then maybe they've got a paper they're working on and they're worried about the writing part. Maybe they're not that comfortable with writing, so they can stop by the writing center and get some tips and information there. And those writing center people are going to say, hey, oh, you're supposed to get some sources and cite them in, AMMLA format. And what does that all mean? And so why don't you make an appointment with a librarian and go talk to them? And they're upstairs. And so like that kind of way in which we can have that flow of referring people to each other and really helping the student in their that academic day-to-day academic journey. That's really important.
And there are a couple of other offices that use this space as well. You mentioned the Writing Center and Center for Academic Excellence. The Honors Program is here.
Yep.
TRIO, Student Support
Correct.
Services, Center for Accessible Academic Resources. This is truly a learning common. It's not just a place where you come to read something online or check out a book or anything like that. It's really, and it's always bustling here. There's always people here. And one of the things that I admire about this space a great deal is that you've mentioned a couple of times kind of the traditional college student experience or college student, but there is a room or two in this space that is also designated for maybe our non-traditional folks that have young kids that they need to bring with them to study. And so there's a family room in the building.
One of the things that we did several years ago with, on the advice of some of the librarians who report to me, we talked about some ways in which we can think more creatively about our space. And one of the librarians suggested, wouldn't it be great to have a space where people with kids who can't get a babysitter, but they need to come in and study, where we could have a space where it's a closed door, an office where we've got work study space for them, but also maybe some stuff for the kids. A little video player, and we've got some DVDs, and we've got some toys and other things. We tried to do a range of age appropriate things, and that has been we actually created that just before the pandemic, so it got a little bit of a slow start, but now I see it being used very frequently as a place where a student can come in, and where it's placed, it's got glass walls around it, so it's a locking door, it's a closed door, but you can see everything that's going on in there. So I see a lot of our students who make use of it. They sit right outside of it. They put their kids in there to do their thing, so they're quiet. So they get their quiet space, and the kids get a space. So, and it's right in our educational resources area, which is the collection that we use to support teaching and training our future teachers at the K through 6 level. And so there's a lot of children's books. I mean, so it's kind of the right space for it. And it's been successful.
One of my favorite spaces, I think, anywhere on campus, but specifically in this building, is actually on the ground floor with our university archives office. If you're any kind of an amateur history goof like me, what a collection we have down there. What kind of role does the archives play, not only in preservation of the history of the institution, but our archivist does a pretty terrific job with regional history as well, and preserving it down there. What was kind of the thought process behind that, both obviously internally, but also the external community approach too?
Well, I'm glad you asked about the archives, because it is one of the other compelling reasons why, when I interviewed here at Salem State, that I thought, wow, there's so much going for us here at Salem State, and the archives to me was this, such a treasure. What I didn't know before I started was that the archives doesn't only just have the history of Salem State as an institution, Salem Normal School, going all the way back, to the mid 19th century, all of the that history just of ourselves in the institution, but has been, over the years, accepting small collections, sometimes small, sometimes a little bit larger, from our local community, particularly Salem, of people who lived here, worked here, had clubs here, just the sort of nothing. There are no witch trial materials here. There's none of the. There's not a whole lot of the like merchant, shipping years here. Those are sort of all in the PEM Museum, the Peabody Essex Museum. So the Salem State Archives has had an opportunity to collect more of what I would say is like the everyday Salem resident, and how they lived here, what they did here, how they socialized here, what clubs they formed, what groups they did. But we've got professors who worked here at Salem State who left their archives, their personal stories here, and things that they did outside of Salem State. So we have a lot of really interesting collections. We have got collections from some local politicians over the years here in Salem. And so there's a few years ago, right after I started, I got a call that led to the discovery that in the old Eastern Bank, which currently today is the Ledger restaurant in Salem, downtown Salem, in their basement, they had hundreds of old ledgers from the 19th and very early 20th century that had belonged to the Salem Savings Bank, which was founded in 1818 and later became Eastern Bank.
Wow.
So it had sat in that vault for years, over 100 years.
Yeah.
And so the person who'd bought the building was looking to rehome those. And quite frankly, they had reached out to the Peabody Essex Museum, and their library was like, that's interesting, but not quite something that they wanted to take on. And so we've had the opportunity to step in and to build our collections to be more of a center where people can study the history of, I'll say, more contemporary Salem. Let's say Salem of the late 19th century throughout the 20th century and hopefully the 21st century. Our archivist did work on some materials during the pandemic in terms of collecting stories and information that we could archive so that sometime, in 100 years from now, people can come to our archives and read about how people handled the pandemic of 2020, 2021. So we're mindful of carrying forward that legacy and what we're keeping in our archives and preserving.
As somebody who learns very visually, one of the things that I appreciate about the library's archive space especially is that a lot of it's chronicled and easily accessible online.
Yes, yes.
Susan has a terrific Flickr page where everything is categorized by album and what the point of the photos are, but there's also a description for most of what's up there as well, which is always nice to get kind of that brief snapshot of what you're looking at and understand why it's important.
It's an important thing we do, and it's one of our biggest priorities to make sure that this stuff doesn't just sit in a vault downstairs, which we have. We call it the vault. It's a huge room, but it is climate controlled. So, but we want that stuff to be findable, accessible. We want people to see and discover and to come in and say, "Hey, I saw this photo. Do you have more like that?" So that's really important. It's really time consuming, and people think digitization is like, it's easy. Put it on the web. I'm here to tell you that it's not. It is if we had all sorts. If we had more funding to go ahead and build and extend that, we'd be able to put things up digitally more quickly and more often. But we make the best that we can with it. But I'm really proud of how much we do have up there, and we continue to have up there. It's a way we work with students too. Students in the history department in particular, but not always in that major, do internships with the archives, and that's where they learn to look at materials, to accession them, to preserve them by scanning them and putting them into our repositories. So
you've made mention of kind of this undercurrent of accessibility to information and delivering it to the people that need it. Libraries specifically, but higher education in general in the national landscape right now are in a different place than, well, I suspect probably to some extent libraries have always kind of been in the state that we're in terms of providing access and the critically important role that it plays. But as you think about earlier in your career to present day to maybe 10 or 20 years into the future, talk a little bit about kind of your perceptions of the landscape, how you've seen it change, how you see it may change in the future.
Sure. Yeah, I think certainly from when I started out in libraries, there was this growing focus on how everything in 10 years, it'll all be on the internet by then, right? There was this expectation somehow that, oh great, well we've got this thing, we've been using this thing called the internet, we're sort of trying to figure out what it's all going to be, we're just going to put it all online, it's great, and then like Google came along and wanted to digitize all the books where I worked at Harvard. They did a bit of it. I mean, that's what Google Books is. We worked with them, and other institutions worked with them, and then they went, oh right, this is never ending. This is a lot. There's actually a lot there is no such thing as digitizing everything. It will still take many, many years. And in fact, you'll always be behind because things are always changing. So that's my sort of preamble to the fact that in libraries, people think libraries just stay the same, but in fact, they're hugely dynamic. They're always changing. It's one of the myths I like to tell people when they talk about libraries. It's like, okay, if you want a job that doesn't change and stays the same, don't go into libraries, because we're always thinking about what information do we have? How is it housed? What is it like? How is it formatted? How do we keep it? What are we focusing more on? Like for the last several years, we of course focused more on formatting and keeping our electronic resources, right? And that takes a different set of skills and workflow than physical things, right? And I think that's going to continue to grow, especially in libraries like this one at Salem State, where we are not a major research library. We are an academic library, but we are not a library of record. We are not a library that keeps, everything for posterity, so to speak. There are libraries like the Library of Congress, like the New York Public Library, like Harvard, that their aim is to keep as much material and be a library of record. That's not our goal. Our goal is to have the information that we need to support our classes and our curriculum, and then to facilitate access to everything else. And I think that that's the future of most libraries, that we continue to be very critical about what we spend our funds on, what we buy, what we have physically for people to have just in time, just right there when they need it, versus the things that we can build our networks in order to get things that are other places to them, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
And you just touched on something else too that I really appreciate about the space, in thinking about access and understanding that the conventional student experience of 50 years ago, where you're here for 5 hours a day for class and then you have whatever else going on in the afternoon, is not the same anymore. Students are working, they're taking care of families. The library is also a space that doesn't open at 8 and close at 5. There's a ton of flexibility in providing access to the space for the students as well.
That's right.
But it's also not just for Salem State students as well. Alumni can use the library.
Yes.
Community members can use the library. So you've done a magnificent job in creating this space that's open and accessible to everybody.
And I want to emphasize that, because yes, we are a public library. We're an academic library, but we are open to the public. You don't have to swipe an ID to walk in the door. You can walk up to any of our 10 computers that are on the first floor of the library, where you don't need to log in. You don't have to have a Salem State ID to log in. And those computers have all of our electronic resources accessible on them. And our licenses allow us to be able to make those accessible. Now, that means that if you are not affiliated with Salem State, but you need to use a specific database, we can't give you access remotely, but anyone can come in and sit down and use those machines to access those materials, and with minimal intervention. You don't have to sign up or reserve or hand over IDs or anything. It's just the nature of libraries, where it's like, you need information, you can come in, you can help yourself and find that information. I know a lot of people think libraries can be scary or off-putting, like, oh, I have to go in and ask if I can use this thing, and I don't know, they might want to ask me why I'm using it. We don't do that. I mean, libraries actually philosophically don't do that, or try not to, unless we're trying to help you find something else. But that's something that I think I would like more people, particularly in the Salem and local area, to know that we're here and we're available, and we want to help. And I think I would like people to know that.
So it was funny, because the last question I was going to ask you is if you could emphasize kind of one point about, I would say, libraries in general, but specifically the Salem State Library, why it's so important to support libraries, to make sure they have the resources they need. And I think you've kind of answered that really nicely right there. But if there's anything else you'd like to add, please feel free.
Yeah, no, I would just add that I think, kind of going back to when I was in college, and I said I worked at the library. I didn't actually work at the library until my senior year of college. And when I think about what I wish I had known my freshman year, when I was taking that philosophy course and other courses, I didn't really use my college library until I worked there as a senior. And then I started to learn and realize how much, wow, this resource, I'd used the library, I'd gone and checked out a book or two, but what I had no idea about was the librarians who teach how to do research and research methodology and how to use information, how to think critically about what you're seeing and reading, and how do you trace sources, and how do you find answers to hard questions, and knowing that there was this group of people that's all they did. They would help you with that. You didn't have to go to your professor's office hours. They would actually help you with that. I didn't know that until really my senior year of college. And to me, that'd be one message that I would say, is that I hope our undergraduates particularly know how much just getting to know the library and getting to know librarians, it can really make a difference in their success in their classes. So that's one plea I would make. Then also lifelong learning. Other people who love libraries, I do think this is a library that people should explore more.
So good people of the North Shore, come see us here at the Frederick E. Berry Library at Salem State. Open to everybody. Everybody's welcome. Come check out this incredible space. Dean of the Library, Elizabeth McKeigue, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And that's been another episode of It Takes a Viking, the official podcast of the Salem State University Alumni Association and Foundation. My name is Mike Mitchell, and until next time, thanks for watching.